What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 56 of the Overview. I'm ChanManV, and joined today by Ben Fishstix over here. What's up, buddy?
Hey, it's actually 65. My God, we're getting in there.
Oh, I put 56. Oh my God, it's 6. No, it's 56.
It's okay, Chris. I just gotta throw some early shade on you in the show. Get the tone started.
It's 56. Gosh, man,
things are going well.
It's 65.
We had a lot of really fun Overwatch to watch over the weekend. I enjoyed a hell of a lot.
Oh man, that's an understatement. And speaking of which, these two guys were casting and hosting and doing all that stuff during most, if not all, of that Overwatch that we're talking about. What's up, Gil and ZP?
Yo, glad to be here as always. Last week, of course, hotel internet was rough, so I decided to just bring things back over here, and I brought this beautiful man along.
Well, I enjoyed it so much last time that how could I not come on again?
It's not from the convenience of your home though this time, Gil.
No, my second home. Actually, is where we're.
He spends a lot of time in the studio. Don't worry about it. In fact, he was here for a meeting earlier before I even got in. So I mean, there's a lot of work that goes on here.
Yeah, it's hard to work the green, Gil, but you definitely do it. Do it well. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about. We got to get started, I think, just to get through some of this. So why don't we just hop on, talk about the game, before we jump into all the esports and all the good stuff. We did have an announcement that it was actually across multiple Blizzard titles, but the Overwatch one, I believe, was the first one I saw. So Overwatch and Hearthstone both had something similar. Basically, new changes. Jeff Kaplan had a developer's update. New changes to the Lootbox system, as well as an update to how highlights are going to be worked, or at least new features to highlights. So why don't we start with the loot boxes first, which they announced basically legendaries. If you don't have all the legendaries, then every new legendary you get will not be a duplicate, which is amazing because I am so sick and tired of getting duplicates, especially when events come out. I feel like I get 3 Halloween Mercies, and I definitely have had certain events where I've gotten a ton of the same ones. So yeah, it's definitely a great thing.
I think for this, I would be really interested to know the reasoning behind how this change came about. It's come from one or two things. Either A, developers look at it and go, this just feels unfair, or B, I'm really curious to know if there was a process there where they actually have data of, well, players stopped logging in forever after getting a duplicate legendary in our games. Like, we have data that shows that there is a non-insignificant portion of people where they get a duplicate legendary in Hearthstone, in Overwatch, and then it just annoys them to where they stop coming in. I don't know if that's a case, but for me, I feel like there's a decent likelihood that they actually might have data like that, and they go, maybe if we just stop giving people duplicates, people will stay more tethered to our games. It very well could be a thing.
Right, I think so.
It's the definition of a quality of life update that pretty much no one's going to argue against. Everyone's going to be happy about this. Does it actually change Blizzard's metrics? I have no idea. I mean, I would guess probably not a whole lot, but everyone's going to be happy. I mean, there's something to be said for community love and appreciation, right?
Yeah, and it's just another bit of proof that these kind of decisions, whether it comes to loot boxes and frequency, are not made by, obviously the development team. I think we always throw hate and throw those type of things and calling Blizzard greedy, and we always throw it at that team, when in reality, these decisions are made by a completely different group. And clearly the group is across multiple games too, because Hearthstone had a very similar thing with the packs, with no duplicate, legendaries from that standpoint. So it's going to be great. I think everybody's going to be happy. We're going to get more coins too, as a way to make up. Jeff did mention that I think the bundles of coins, I believe, that we get, when you get like a legendary box, I think that will be increased. It's not necessarily duplicate coins will be higher. Is that what you guys got from the video, or did you think it was differently?
I think what they said is that because you're going to be getting less duplicates, which give you coins, there's just going to be more coins in boxes generally.
Right.
I could be wrong about that. I only watched it once. I didn't take detailed notes, but I think that's the case.
I hope there's more in each of those piles.
Well, that would make more sense.
They're saying, yeah.
That would make sense, because you still have the idea where if you've removed all duplicates from the game and you're only relying on the current level of gold chests that you get, if you want to get one specific skin, you might have to go in deeper, grab more boxes, spend more money to actually get what you want. So there's a little bit of a nice change that's added in there that wasn't necessarily needed to be done, but is definitely helpful to the players.
Definitely. Okay, let's talk about highlights. That was the other thing that Jeff spent some time on in the video. So you have the ability now to essentially clip, different plays from the game and create your own highlights, and then actually save them to a local file too. So obviously this is great for content makers, and I don't know, might be overlapping with Twitch clips also then. But what do you guys think of it, Gil?
I mean, I actually really like it. It's interesting to see little changes like this because you see other games fully integrate things like streaming and clipping and recording, and it's almost like an answer to the algorithm. Like, hey, if you think you have a better algorithm personally, if you think that was a better play than we thought, now you can actually record it. I don't know how much I'm going to use it. I always go into these things thinking, oh, yeah, that's cool. I'm going to clip my own stuff. And then I always forget. I'm too excited when I actually make an awesome play that the very few times that it happens that I just immediately forget.
It wasn't just self-reflection where we went, oh, actually, it wasn't that great.
Yeah, and then I look at it later, I'm like, really?
It's not a moment of like left guy loses confidence in his great play. It's like 3K was actually 1K.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty excited about the feature because I don't always want to stream because I'm tired and don't want to whatever. But I always want to have the ability to go back and clip my gameplay. I mean, it's not all the time. Like, you could play for 7 hours in a day and not really get a single moment that's like super incredible, has to be clipped. But every once in a while, you have one of those moments where something completely absurd, hilarious happens. Maybe you have one of those moments, Mercy fucking dies and goes straight up into the air. And those are always good. You want to save those moments. So I'm glad for that. But I'm not nearly as excited about highlights as what I feel like highlights are building towards, which is a more proper demo recording system where you could go in, watch the game from any perspective. That's the dream. And we've talked about it on the show innumerable times. But the potential for things like, well, for teams going back and reviewing their gameplay and watching from different angles, and coaches going back and from that perspective. Also, the frag movie capability. This game has incredible frag movie potential, but because there's no recording system, no demo system, which we had in Quake, which we had in Tribes, which we have in 1.6, you have it in Dota, you have it in all these games. That's really what I think we're all kind of, at least personally, I see this and I'm like, cool, but I'm really excited about what's after this, not really this. I'll use it though. I'll say that much.
Yeah. Is it really getting that close to that? I mean, are we going to be with these highlights?
I don't know.
Are we able to spectate these highlights? No, right?
No.
I think we're still far from replays.
I'm just speculating at my best case scenario here.
Right.
Well, you would have to think replays are coming in sooner rather than later. I mean, it has been one of the most often requested features. It's something that has tangible benefits to growing the game on multiple levels. I mean, it's useful for the competitive end from a just functionality standpoint. It's useful from the community end in terms of seeing cool stuff. So no matter how you slice it, it's a feature that when it is added to the game would be immensely valuable. So yeah, I mean, maybe it means that the tech and making that more readily accessible is on the way. I mean, I would just assume it's on the way because it's such a valuable feature.
Jeff's talked about it too.
Yeah. Oh, he's definitely been giving us
a
these
year
little,
ago. I think he talked about it.
Well, he throws out these little hints every once in a while that they're definitely looking into replay. They're working on replay, and hopefully we get it by the end of the year. That'd be pretty amazing. Okay, so next bit of news is, of course, our recurring Doomfist segment, which is when is Doomfist coming out, or is there any kind of leaks and all that good stuff? Well, the most recent thing that we've seen is something that was posted on the forums, and it came out of an error log from the PTR, I believe, just on the PTR server, and they got an assertion error that had Doomfist and Summer Games in the same error message. So basically what people are thinking is that Doomfist is going to be coming out with that event, which would
confirmed right guy actually Doomfist.
That's right, right guy Doomfist.
Yeah, what you guys could see is that underneath the desk, the Doomfist was actually there. Like, you're talking about the idea that there are holes. Like, we actually referenced this on stream, that there are holes in the Carbon Studio walls, and you don't know if it's true or not, but if it was, it probably was caused by Right Guy and his Fist of Doom.
Yeah, he's nefarious.
That mustache, man, the killer mustache.
Oh, no.
All right, so what do you guys think? Summer Games, would you be disappointed if Doomfist came out in Summer Games versus BlizzCon? Because that was always been my prediction, is Doomfist would be BlizzCon.
I mean, what child was ever disappointed that they got the thing they really want for Christmas 6 months early, ChanManV? Like, please point me to that person because that wasn't me.
Oh man.
I'd be
Okay,
down.
I mean, it just
think
means
I'm
we're getting
jaded
to be
now.
great.
Yeah,
it just means we're going to get something else at BlizzCon.
I
So
hope so.
exactly.
I'm good with it.
I hope BlizzCon's not just a total letdown because Doomfist came out a couple months before.
Listen, if it is a letdown, it's your fault for having different expectations.
Okay,
You just need to lower your standards if
I
we get
guess
Doomfist
so,
early.
right?
You heard it here first. Blame ChanManV when BlizzCon sucks.
Yep.
That's it. That
You
is
guys
how it's
better
gonna
be
work
epic,
out.
Jeff. You better have an awesome announcement during BlizzCon, or else I'm gonna be upset. Okay, well, let's get into the news. Lots of bits of news, especially with teams and maybe some players. Biggest piece of news, obviously after the EU contenders finished up, we got an announcement that Ninjas in Pajamas is releasing their Overwatch team, which is pretty big. I mean, it's very, very big news, given that NIP has always been one of the original European Overwatch teams, ever since the beta, and even had stints where 4tank was huge. They were the best. They were the team that introduced 3 and 4 tanks to the meta. So seeing this team that's been on the obviously downtrending this entire time, and us waiting for them to adapt or figure out a way to produce better results in the current meta. Well, it's gotten to the point where at least NIP as an organization has decided to release them. So another organization in the long list of others that are taking a step back from Overwatch. All right, what are your thoughts on this, Ben?
It's this trend that we've been seeing for some time now. I didn't really expect this to happen here. I know everyone's waiting for OW League details. I know a lot of the team owners are getting a little bit anxious, a little bit nervous, wondering what their investments, what's the point of their investment. I still thought that these established esports teams would want to keep a roster around, even though you're paying the salaries and all that, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's still an esport that gets decent viewership. It's not, OW League will hopefully bring it to the next level, but you're still getting, impressions for your sponsors. There's still highlight videos. The YouTube clips are huge. It's still pretty big on Twitch. So it's still like a viable esport. Second point is I thought that they'd want to just show their dedication. Like, hey, Blizzard, we're dedicated enough to hold our team until OW League. We want to be part of it. This is us proving that. So I'm kind of surprised by the continuation of this trend. I mean, yeah, NIP hadn't been as successful as they had been in the past, but look, the rebirth of this team, rest in pajamas, RIP. They made it through, and they're going to be in the top 8 of Overwatch Contenders EU side. So I'm a little bit surprised, frankly, that this trend is continuing.
Well, I'm not actually surprised for a few reasons in regards to NIP. There's a few very key reasons. I think this could have been seen coming a mile away in their particular instance. One is that NIP as an org has had disarray in their other games to begin with, where they've been struggling to reconsolidate rosters. And the trend that you've been seeing in Overwatch has not been really successful teams dropping their teams. That hasn't been the case. What you've been seeing in Overwatch, you've been seeing teams that have struggled to maintain top 4 go, actually, if we can't go into Overwatch League, we're not really going to be able to immediately sell off these players or sell off the team to another team because they're not really that great. We don't know where our investment is going to go here. So the very good teams are not getting dropped. NIP, unfortunately, had a slump for a long time, and I actually think that the way NIP as an org has just been having issues as of late, I think it's a testament to how well the NIP team was doing in general that NIP didn't step away earlier, but NIP had a sustained slump. They were able to get, tread water and at least get in the top 8 in Europe, but the team was struggling for quite a while, in all fairness.
It wasn't surprising to me. Mainly, I couldn't have predicted specifically that this team would do that, although there's a lot of indicating factors as far as performance goes. But my big thing is like there seems to be a couple different factors as an org when you're looking at what do I want to still be in this Overwatch space. And one is, am I as an org going to be able to get into Overwatch League? Because this is no longer just performance based. It's not like, can I be a good enough team to get in Overwatch League? It is, can I be a cohesive enough org with enough backing to get into Overwatch League? And so if you're not an org that can do that, that's one thing that maybe you pull out. And then you've also got the potential of, well, now if we can't be in Overwatch League, do we want to be in some of these tier 2 or developmental style leagues? Do we want to be in contenders? Is that going to be financially viable for us? Do we want to balance our investment into this team to where lower prize pools from smaller events is worth it? And NIP, it looks like they just decided that neither of those were probably going to work out. And so here we go.
And just to pile onto that a little bit more is that don't forget that Overwatch, in terms of getting players are highly valued. Salaries are very high in Overwatch already relative to the size of the esports scene. And a lot of it does come from hype for Overwatch League. So if you're NIP and you're really just struggling to rebuild your teams and other games that right now you've been trying to shore up, paying for, like, think about it this way. One is that the NIP team wasn't necessarily doing well enough to immediately perhaps sell off to a bigger organization. And then two is that if they do start doing well, how are you going to recoup on the money you've brought in when they start asking for a lot more money? Because players talk with each other. Most of the players know what players on other teams are getting. Yeah, you're not supposed to tell other orgs what you're getting, but the reality is that the salaries for a lot of the teams in the game right now, they're somewhat of an open secret in the competitive community. So for NIP, it's sort of in a sense, it's a difficult situation if they weren't going to allocate a lot more resources into Overwatch, because they're in this weird spot where the team isn't good enough to immediately throw to another org. But if they do get good, they're probably not going to be able to afford to keep them. So,
silver lining here for me.
Okay. All right.
We have,
what is that?
First of all, they went through. They're in the top 8. They made it through contenders, EU side. Second of all, Linkser has joined the team, and this guy has always been one of my favorite players in the scene.
Yes.
Very, very, very talented Genji back in the day, who I always thought I was always expecting him to see him go a lot further. So I'm excited to see him playing with that squad. Still fully finish. All 9 of them. Apparently, they have 8 people on the roster and a coach.
Well, they're basically the Overwatch World Cup team for Finland at this point as well.
Well, minus.
That's
time.
true.
Minus without time.
Minus time. Yeah.
Oh yeah, without time. I'm like, wait, who is it? Oh, it's
yeah.
right.
Yeah, that guy who's doing some work down in Korea right now.
I mean, that does bode well for
Good
the
aim.
squad. I mean, that's a great point. They're in the closest situation as any other team to kind of Rogue, where they almost have their entire full roster on a single team. So if they practice as a team, they're practicing for World Cup and vice versa.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, I think Gil brought it up. ZP, you mentioned some things too. After contenders, right? We have World Cup, but if you're not participating in World Cup, then what are you doing? Until Overwatch League is announced, right? And I feel like NIP is looking at that. All these other teams are looking at that too, and they can always come back to Overwatch 2. Maybe you don't participate in Season 1. Season 2 will definitely be an expansion, and then maybe at that point you can really get a good assessment of the investment.
Well, from what's been publicly mentioned, you have sort of this 3-tier system, right? Where the idea is that the open division is likely going to lead into contenders in some way. And then contenders is a place where if you're doing really well in contenders, well, teams that are in the Overwatch League proper are going to want to pick up new talent that's doing well. So you'd think that there is a rather tiered progression system there. But I mean, you do have a point where right now it's a rough month or two, I'd say. It's not even that big of a gap, but I do think it's like a rough month or two if you weren't able to get top 8 here. And, it's just, you do have those gaps every now and then.
Yeah. Okay, next up, we've got a letter from Nate to, I guess generally just to all of us in the community, but the letter was really talking about emails that have been sent out to the players. So, this is obviously Nate's way of telling us that, hey, we're obviously moving forward with Overwatch League. We're moving to the next phase, and this phase is basically the players that are effectively being scouted or qualified in their eyes, to be part of this league or be potentially players on these teams are all receiving letters. And he kind of goes on. There's a couple bullet points that talk about some of the qualifications the players need to have to be part of this. And just because just because you receive an email doesn't mean you're automatically in the league. It's just, these are the group of players that they're looking at. So, what do you guys take from this letter from Nate? And, just in terms of progress of Overwatch League and, maybe what it means for the players.
Combine. Sorry.
Why don't you start with the combine? Exactly, right?
No, I mean, and Yeah, because there's obviously that's been kind of a meme, but I think that it's just another step in the direction of like trying to open things up as much as possible. I mean, we look at even just Contenders having 700 teams in EU that signed up, and like the fact that things
It's
are
fucking
so
awesome.
open
Yeah.
is they want to make sure that everyone has some avenue of access. And of course, this is going to be a very small percentage of players, maybe not even almost any at all, as a part of this like email, that are going to be affected by this necessarily. But it's a very early step that you can take as a player, like if you've made it up to that level, to tangibly say, hey, this is something I'd like to pursue.
It also just means that Blizzard is doing proper due diligence by the people that have invested into Overwatch League and giving them as much data as possible. Where, I mean, if you're being absolutely realistic, it is most likely that most of your players that are participating in Overwatch League Season 1 will likely be the players that have accomplished great things in Overwatch tournaments like Contenders, Apex, etc. Like players that are proven, but it's also showing that, look, you want to keep your eye out for new players. I mean, you see it in traditional sports all the time where it's good to have a good farm system. It's good to look at avenues to get players that perhaps are less trotted, and maybe there's a team or two that is able to use some of the data gathered here to find a diamond in the rough.
And I think one of the things I'm reading between the lines here, it wasn't really explicitly said in this letter, but one of the things I'm taking away from it is kind of affirmation for what my feelings were already about Overwatch Contenders, in that it's meant to showcase. I mean, they actually said this right out the bat when they announced Contenders. It's a tool for showcasing talent for teams and eventually for Overwatch League. Season 0's in a kind of weird spot, obviously. We don't have super concrete details about Overwatch League, but to me, this letter even more solidified the fact that the whole point of Contenders and all the big leagues right now is to showcase talent, individual player talent, establish a pecking order from the existing teams. I think as a tool to arm the big organizations that will be looking to secure a spot in OW League with the knowledge that they need. We're recording stats on all these players. We're establishing pecking orders, showcasing their talent, and yeah, I think this even more affirms that for me.
Well, I mean, one thing that's really important to know of Contenders is that it's multi-purpose, right? Is that A, it's just competitive content for people that want to consume it. But B is that, as you mentioned, is that you are getting a big spotlight on these players. And one thing that's really important to know for Overwatch is that player data sometimes ages like milk, where just when you think you've found the next big team, suddenly whether it be meta changes or just people changing all around them, they're not quite as good. So having up-to-date data is really important when building a very good team. I mean, there's no better example of that than the Yikes roster. Now, Arc 6, where you take a look at them, there's a point where they were looking like one of the top 2 teams in NA, or at least the top 4. Like, it felt all but assured that there would be an OW Contenders Season 1, and then what happens? People figure them out. They get game tape on them. How do we beat this team? And then you have a thriller where FNRGFE just executes a brilliant game plan and knocks them out entirely. So a team that you might have looked at as like, I want to pick up this entire team, is now a team that's likely just going to be sort of dispersed amongst the Overwatch landscape, because it would be weird to see them stick together at 6 at this point. It's more likely that the good players will filter through.
It's possible because there are going to be obviously future opportunities to make it into Contenders, and there's multiple layers for a reason. But yeah, I mean, organizations that maybe weren't going to get into Overwatch League to begin with, that wanted to be in Contenders to have that platform, you just have to find other platforms. And I mean, one thing to note about this, and I know we're going to talk more about Contenders later, is this was like a place for the players to really shine. Like the focus of this event was on the players and like opening things up to the players, and then Season 1 is going to be more about, now let's really showcase the players, because you get a little bit of showcasing in Season 0, but that wasn't the purpose. The purpose of Season 0 here was to get into that so that Season 1 can really be that platform.
Yeah.
And right now, you think about it from a player point of view, I mean, it's most valuable to build your brand, because even as you look at right now, I would say look at the landscape is that while it's great to get behind teams, the reality is that you do get roster churn in Overwatch. The final Overwatch League teams that come out, I'm not going to guess that all of them will be just complete rosters that you see right now. I think there's going to be a lot of changing coming up. So as a player, the best thing you could do going into Contenders, I mean, yeah, you want to win games as a team, obviously, that continues to let you showcase. But if you could have good games where you yourself just look great, that really gets your name out there and helps you continue your prospects on your Overwatch career.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see if a lot of these teams that we do see in contenders, or just we've always known, end up breaking out, even just end up being picked apart, through this type of process. I think all of our inclinations are, it's not, at least this first season, it's going to be a lot of full teams picked up, six rosters, or rosters of 6 being picked up. But what if it was complete? What if literally every single team we know does not exist ever again, and it's a bunch, just combinations of 6 players from all of these rosters together? That would be a crazy, crazy world.
I mean, I think
kind of
to some
exciting in a
extent
way.
Yeah.
I think that's more likely than not for a lot of teams. I mean, I'm sure some teams will stick together as a unit, but I think a lot of teams will get mixed and matched as you have orgs that perhaps haven't signed anyone yet, looking at contracts that might be expired for some of these teams, and they go, maybe I want this guy, but I don't want everyone else on it. And this is where it's going to be up to teams to shine in terms of having really good management in the back to build these teams, because there's a wide difference, for example, between a team like Immortals that they did a big team revamp and came out really strong, and a team like TSM where they basically have all the pieces of the now successful Kangarna team, and they're not able to do anything with it. They have to release it, and then the players on their own come together and come through and get in. So having really good management is going to be crucial for these teams going forward.
I could even see a circumstance where Overwatch League is announced, and orgs that don't have teams at all, they buy in essentially, and then they are building the teams based on the information that they're getting here from contenders, from other events. And so it's going to be an interesting mix when it comes to Overwatch League, and Overwatch League is going to be completely different than a lot of things I think we've seen.
Yeah, and think about there's all these free agents just floating around right now that still don't have teams. I mean, there's incredible potential to build. We've been talking about contenders now for so long. We have a whole contenders section coming later. But there's so much potential to build awesome squads, and we're seeing that happen right now with FNRG. FE is basically like an amalgamation of free agents and people from disbanded teams, and they're so hot right now.
Yeah, they're doing great, man.
Dude, I'm loving watching this team play.
Do you know how much it depresses me, though? That I guess it's one thing. It's like, but how have we got to an era where it's just like FNRG FE? I can say it in my sleep now. It's just like, this is a terrible team name, Brad.
I think CP. I think you mean phonography.
Phonography. Yeah. Phonography.
Say it with
Okay.
me,
Yes.
CP.
You guys are gonna have to pick that up.
I did give it to Jason, Ben. I'm definitely not giving it to you. I'm holding strong.
Oh man. Okay, well, why don't we move on to the next bit of news, which involves a team getting a sponsor. Yes, so a bit more better news than obviously teams leaving and whatnot. So we've got Lazer Kittens actually signing a deal with JetSmarter, supposedly around, or apparently it's to be estimated around 500K plus, a little something over 500K. And I know me and you, Ben, have had this discussion, I mean, maybe even years ago, and we were wondering, why don't these esport teams ever get sponsored by airlines? Because, the cost of traveling for all these teams is a huge expense for all of these teams. So JetSmarter, just for folks, well, don't even talk about your interview of United here in a second. But JetSmarter, guys, is, just for those of you who don't know what JetSmarter, it's described as an plane Uber, right? A flying Uber type of thing where you can get different, flights and rates, just kind of standalone rates at different times. So for Lazer Kittens, it's going to provide a way for them to travel for free, in my opinion, in addition to just that 500K.
On private jets, too.
On private jets, too.
That's sick.
Nice.
Dude, that's so sick.
Yeah. ZP, you're going to say something about United?
No, I thought there was a gap there. I was just going to say is that, well, I mean, I'm not sure United wants to sponsor anything related to combat. It might be bad for their image right now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised, though, realistically, if Lazer Kittens flies coach still. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. But to me, this really just means Lazer Kittens, they want to be in OWL. That's what it tells me. So.
It looks really good on the team, although if you think about how it'll probably work out in respect is that I think they will get their flights. It's just, bear in mind how that would work is that, so if you're a private jet company, right, the way it works is that oftentimes you're going to have sort of deadhead flights where you are flying a plane from one area to another for a client that's paying big dollars, but technically no one is on that jet at that same time. So it'll probably be something along the lines of like, look, we know that this client in London wants to fly out here, but we're bringing a plane from the area you're in right now. So if you want to get your flight to London on this private jet, we will give you this value and count it as part of the sponsorship. So I mean, there are ways that logistically they can actually have this all work where JetSmart looks good, Lazer Kittens looks good, and from the JetSmart side, they're not actually just spending tons of money on the sponsorship without it making sense.
I just want to see Kibb's face on the tail of the plane. I want to see the whole lineup of their planes on individual sponsored planes.
I want to see Alicus's face.
I want to see a Lazer Kitten. I want to see a Lazer Kitten up there.
Oh man, the Lazer Kittens logo.
This Winston,
I love that.
this Winston right here.
How ironic is it that the team that brings in the biggest sponsorship for Overwatch is called Lazer Kittens? I thought that was like one of those temporary names that
Right?
isn't gonna last.
No, I knew it wasn't. I mean, maybe it could have been. Well, once they came out with their branding, I was like, wow, they put a lot of this branding. They really want to just make this a thing, because that's how else do you get fans early on? I mean, they're gonna like your branding and they're gonna like your name. Maybe they'll like your play as well, hopefully. But
it is a little bit of a break from.
Screw the actual, real content.
A little bit of a break from tradition of U.S. sports, at least, where the goal is to make your teammate name sound as macho as possible. For the most part, I mean, you have the tigers, the lions. You have this big, intimidating animals. Although then you have teams like the Dolphins, where the
Mighty
Dolphins don't really have much success nowadays.
Okay.
Sorry, Miami.
Sorry, Miami. Wow. Okay, well, since we've been alluding to Overwatch Contenders a lot, let's just dive into it. Obviously, Overwatch Contenders being a huge topic again. I mean, it's the last month, 2 months now. And of course, this week we ended up nailing down the playoff brackets for both EU and NA. So why don't we bring up the EU bracket, and then we can just kind of start talking from there. That's right here. Okay, so we've got E United, Movie Star Riders, Singularity, Lazer Kittens, 123, Rest in Pajamas, which Ben mentioned it was basically NIP. That's not NIP anymore. Misfits and Bazooka Puppies. So I guess first question is, any surprises or any teams that you were surprised that are not on this list?
Not really, to be honest.
Not really. I mean, there were some teams that I could have easily seen making it. Team Expert, I thought, did a really good job. They were a close one. And then I guess Vivi's Adventure and Gamers Origin, after week 1, maybe didn't think so, but just out of the qualifiers, I thought they could contend.
Gamers Origin would be the big one for me, where they had a good qualifier week and then they just completely fell off the cliff later on. So it wasn't quite as good for them. For me, there is just the slight disappointment that the bracket is not set up in such a way that unless they both get to the finals, you're probably not going to have the Puppies Kittens matchup, which just would have been hilarious on a casting point of view.
Puppies Kittens.
That's the Lazer Kittens.
That was
memeable.
That was huge.
ZP wanted to use the there's a huge both teams basically wipe each other out, and it's raining cats and dogs.
I would expect production.
I can't take credit for that. That's your thing, Gil. That's your. You wanted it to rain cats and dogs.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about, I guess, the different brackets then. For me, that first half, that top bracket looks to be a pretty exciting one, at least in the first couple rounds there. More so than the bottom one with Misfits and Puppies. Misfits, I would expect get through. I would expect Misfits to get to the finals here. Relatively easy too. I don't think there's much of a challenge there. What do you guys think? We never know with Misfits, but
if I was a betting man, probably. But
I think two things. One is that you really can't take anything for granted in Overwatch right now. The scene is clearly proven to be volatile, even amongst top teams, where we'll see a top team have a bad week, or we'll see a top team or a mid-tier team beat a top team with an unexpected strategy. So I don't know if there's anything that I feel super, super sure of in general. And I will say that Misfits has been very back and forth. We've seen that in results where they will put on just a really great week of results, and then they'll have a really bad week. So yeah, I think if you looked at statistically, it's likely that they get to the finals, but there's also a lot of ways that they don't.
Yeah, and I think that there's enough talent on some of the other teams that I am expecting some upsets. I know that doesn't make as much sense. Specifically, I mean, looking at 1, 2, 3, who actually ended up coming out above Movistar Riders, and arguably Movistar Riders didn't perform up to maybe the standard that they have in past events. But you can't overlook the fact that 1, 2, 3 has come out as strong as they are for even an unknown team. But that said, I mean, Misfits definitely the favorite on that bottom half.
Yeah, and 1, 2, 3, I think if you look at the 1, 2, 3 RIP matchup that's coming in, I think you would be foolish to put tons of faith into RIP. Even though I'd still favor them somewhat in that matchup, 1, 2, 3 has been surprising. They've looked better than expected. You have players like Mistakes coming out of nowhere with really good tracer plays. So there is a possibility of an upset there if you consider that to be an upset.
Okay, well, definitely Misses is coming into this bracket pretty hot, given that they got some revenge over Lazer Kittens, which didn't get to see, unfortunately. But again, like they seemed like they were back to at least playing well against a solid team like Lazer Kittens.
Well, Misfits and Lazer Kittens have just been doing this back and forth dance where
it's a rival.
Misfits they'll beat Lazer Kittens, they'll do well in qualifier day, and then 1 week later, Lazer Kittens will do way better against Misfits, and then another week later, they'll just keep trading off blows. So I mean, I guess it's a little bit worrisome for Misfits because if you go on this back and forth schedule, that would mean if they met in the finals this weekend that Lazer Kittens would win. So that's a little bit scary.
And one thing I just want to keep in mind for everyone as well is, I mean, this is, of course, the playoffs bracket for some prizing and some, just pride on some level. But all of these teams are going to be at least in season 1. And that's really when I think the fun begins. That's what I'm most excited for. So
yeah, all these guys qualified for it. So that's definitely a great thing that all these guys can enjoy. So Singularity, what do you guys think? Dark horse or no?
Dude, I just I need to watch the EU scene better because there's always new teams popping up that I am not super familiar with. This is yet another one. I was just looking at their roster and I recognize a couple of the names, but it's pretty cool that they're all from Denmark. So 3 out of the 6 of these folks are going to be on the actual Danish World Cup team, which is pretty cool.
I would peg Singularity as one of the weaker teams here, and they're going up against one of the stronger teams in Lazer Kittens. So that would be probably one of the biggest upsets possible if they were to beat LK. Not impossible by any standards. Again, we just talked about the volatility, but I would say that one is probably one of the safer matchups that LK should take in the first round.
Yeah. Well, definitely would love to see an LK Misfits, again, another rematch there, just because they've been having these great, or at least this great rivalry going. But, E United, we'll see if they can kind of get it together, at least for this week. They seem to be another one of those teams that's like hot one week and not the next. So well, maybe they didn't get hot here. We'll have to see.
United was very middle of the road where, I mean, they didn't play badly at any point really, but they weren't crushing teams the way that you should. And that's actually one thing in esports that's really important is that if you're trying to determine how dominant a team is, margin of victory over weaker teams is a big deal where if you're just getting through, which they kind of did, especially in week 1 of the qualifiers, it's not the best omen for your team. It's more teams that are truly at the top, they will go through runs where they will just make teams look embarrassingly bad for stretches at time.
Right.
United definitely has the ability to win it all here. Don't get me wrong, but their consistency has definitely been a little bit in question recently.
Okay, well, let's talk about NA. So let me bring up the NA bracket here, and just to kind of go through the top 8: Immortals, FaZe Clan, LG Evil, Congarna, Renegades, FNRGFE, Team Liquid, Envision, and so that's the top 8. Let's talk about the teams that didn't make it, okay? So I have a list here. Selfless, CLG, Toronto Esports, Arc6, which was Yikes before, C9, Tempo Storm, Hammers Esports, and you guys get paid. So I think that's a bit more of a discussion as to like some of the teams that didn't make it here, I think, versus EU. So let's talk.
I've never heard of any of those teams that didn't make it. They all are. I'm just going to look them up.
There's many teams that didn't make it that are.
There just hasn't been enough NA coverage, Gil.
Yeah.
Where could you possibly have found out about these teams? But no, NA was stacked, and it's what made the group stage for NA really exciting and watching the storylines. But as mentioned, there were big surprises. The behemoth of a surprise, of course, was C9, where you have a C9 core, which admittedly has been whittled down to just Surefour and Adam now, but C9 as a team has been making very strong investment into the scene. And for a team that has generally been no lower than 4 and very often 2, to not even get into the top 8 for contenders is a big blow to their fans and a big blow to the organization. I mean, it's massive.
Yeah, I would say borderline disaster for this
Yes.
squad. I mean,
Yeah,
I have to agree with that.
I actually disagree with that.
Wow. Okay.
A little bit. I mean, obviously a disaster from a maybe results perspective. Like, how could they be performing this bad? But I think if you're an org like Cloud9, I think they probably have their sights set on Owl. And so at this point, this is more of it's a much smaller thing for them not to be in contenders. Obviously, it would give them a lot of brand presence over the next, during season 1. And whatever else happens before Overwatch League, but their brand is big enough, and if they're already invested in Overwatch League, that's probably what they're thinking of from an organization perspective.
oh, sure. I completely agree
about that.
this is for C9 as an org. This is just a bump in the road. I'm talking about the roster
the
itself,
players.
though.
Yeah, like how could you lose this?
Yeah,
The other
and
thing too is that one thing that's I think worth noting here, and this is a little bit Machiavellian, but it is how esports work, is that the slots of contenders will belong to the teams that have them, right? Well, you do have the part here where you have some unsponsored teams are in here, like FNRGFE. C9 could get back into contenders by simply buying out the roster of one of these teams, mixing and matching a few of their spots, and then, bam, C9 is back at the contenders. So, I mean, they're somewhat lucky in the sense that you have some unsponsored teams in here, because C9, if they're really serious about this, which they are, I think that's actually a more likely power play than not.
Yeah, but that's just, I mean, that's formality more so than it is reality, like whether they deserve to be in there or not. I mean, I agree with Ben. I think it's actually a huge disaster for them, given that, I mean, we had all this fun smack talking too that was going on during the week, between Michael and, I mean, Kaiser smack talk is like, grade A, man, with some of those tweets.
Kaiser is the best memer.
Oh my God.
Well, he's one of the top memers. He has to compete with like Arts here, who basically quick competitive Overwatch to become the memer over time.
But anyways, having that kind of grudge match and, having it go wrong for you, that's definitely not good, And then on top of that, we had Dupe, who's the Congarna's coach, even giving a little insight into, I guess, what they were doing, or maybe just generally preparing for, a series whenever they have it, or some kind of group stages. And, a lot has to do with map picking, or just who gets to pick first, and knowing which maps you're going to play. And, given the week leading up to it, or the weeks leading up to it, you have to schedule your practices, or at least make them as efficient as possible to work on those maps that you're going to be playing. And they were definitely, in that article, he was alluding to C9 obviously not doing that in some ways, or didn't seem to be prepared, or didn't know that they had first pick or not first pick on some of these things. So you have all these things kind of building up, and how many times, like, how long do we have to wait for C9 to actually live up to potential? I mean, they have not yet, and it's like so frustrating, because I'm rooting for them. I'm like rooting for them too.
When they were leaving to go to Apex, everyone was riding that C9 train, and like before they went to Apex, Immortals beat them like pretty handily, and I'm like, this C9. I mean, they're not what everyone thinks they are. I mean, they obviously have been up there, but they're another team that we need to see them really stand out for an extended period of time. I mean, even like teams like Selfless, that's the biggest one of the bigger upsets here is Selfless kind of going down in this one. I mean, it was hard, but they just haven't been performing lately. But
I wonder why. It's almost as if they had a cataclysmic roster change. I mean, I don't know. It just do you know that the Bulls, when Michael Jordan went off to play baseball, had a downturn, Gil? They weren't quite as good. They replaced him
with a solid player, though, but he's not different.
They
Jordan.
It's.
Well, and it's the worst time. Because I think they could easily get back on the upturn very quickly as they adapt a new person to their roster. DeFran, obviously, being a major part of that. But the fact that it happened right before, they didn't have any time to recover. So,
look, I'm not going to name any names here specifically, but I'll just say that generally speaking, pro players are they have egos about themselves, right? Where when evaluating other players, it's like, oh, that guy's good, but I'm not sure he's better than me type of stuff. There were very notable DPS players that when talked to about DeFran, they're just like, this guy is incredible. Like, he is very arguably the best soldier in the game. Right. This came from people that, generally speaking, do not want to give credit to other players. So you can say it's like, oh, they replaced him with a strong player. Okay. It's not DeFran. It's not even remotely close to Defran. So, yeah, it's not really that big of a surprise that Selfless went into the toilet.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, the Carpe is a very good replacement, about as good as you could hope for on such short notice. Right. But I mean, this roster, they've been playing the Roadhog Reinhardt strategy. That's when they were dominant, was with that composition. So they've been forced out of that. Emong has had to be playing just Winston 24/7, which he hasn't looked as comfortable with. So I would say Selfless, I'm a big fan of this team. I'm sad about them dropping out, but it's actually not a huge surprise to me in this case.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So you guys did allude to something, not just like kind of last point on C9. A few of the you guys on the desk mentioned wondering about just some of the moves they made, like going into that last night, or at least that last match with Kangarna, switching say Gods and Zephyr for instance to even Tracer, and as well as just Surefour dominating on Pharah in that first part of Oasis, and then switching to Genji, right, or just switching to just switching off Pharah, given that he's like the best Pharah right now.
Well, and I feel like we see this happen to Renegades as well. They're another team that like I feel like they have something that would work, but they just pick something else. I don't know if it's just the individual players thinking, I want to play this, or this wasn't working, and not really seeing that it was. It's hard to say, but yeah, I definitely feel like there was some decision-making that could have changed the outcome of that one.
It's part where I wonder if C9 outthought themselves to some extent there. I also, one thing I'll say that C9 was struggling to find their footing, what they're comfortable with, but I think if one thing actually hurt them rather severely in the Contenders in retrospect is that I'm not sure them going to Takeover was, I mean, the problem is that they had committed the Takeover before Contenders was announced, right? So it caught them by surprise. But I actually don't think Takeover did them a lot of favors, because you stop and think about that, where it is a lot of fatigue, where you have to travel out there in advance. You have to get back. You have Kaiser, who basically went through the ringer going from Korea, then directly to Germany. I do think that C9 might have performed a little bit better if they were just able to boot camp at home and focus in and just get bigger scrim blocks into this. I mean, this is just my theory, but it just seemed like they didn't have the preparation that they normally did, and I just wonder if some of their recent travel scheduling combined with the last moment roster swaps kind of all came together in a not so great way for them.
Right.
Well,
yeah, a lot of people were saying it. We mentioned it already. Obviously on Garden, you'd be dumb if you don't play Pharmacy in this current meta. Like Garden is probably the best point, maybe in the entire game for Pharmacy. But City Center is the one where they didn't run Pharmacy. And that was what surprised a lot of people, myself included. Then, yeah, you're right. I mean, we saw Surefour playing Genji. We all know he's a great Genji, but that was, we were all kind of scratching our heads about that. Then we saw everyone just kind of swapping around in a way that didn't seem like it made a lot of sense. Like, obviously, Bishop knows what's been going on behind the scenes in the scrims and made that decision, or somebody made that decision. And there's a lot of context that we don't have, but it just seems weird from an outsider's perspective.
It could be your classic case of looking like a genius versus looking dumb, like based on results there. So,
well, I will note as far as as far as it goes to deal with Fair and Mercy, is that you look at teams like FN or GFE, you don't always need a Fair and Mercy in some of these maps. I mean, there's plenty of ways of dealing with it. I actually think Fair and Mercy is probably in a really good spot right now meta-wise, because you see it somewhat often. It's not always dominant. There are counters to it. It's not, and it's not a thing where a team can get away with really running Fair and Mercy every stage. So I don't know. I don't think a team is, even on the stage, is good at. Like, you don't have to run it to win maps. So I actually think it's in a good spot now. So I won't ding a team too much for not running a Fair and Mercy on a setup. The only thing I just wonder with C9 is that they're pretty good at running it, and if the other team hasn't stopped you, why not keep running it?
And that's the main thing. It's like you play at one point, it works. Maybe keep playing what works. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert.
At least the beginning of that next one, right? Just to see.
Right.
Okay, so well, enough of the teams that didn't make it. Let's talk about the teams that actually made it. And man, this first round, there's some good matchups here. I mean, I think every one of these matchups are great. So
well, keep in mind that only 6 of these teams, by the way, make it into season 1. Yeah. So there's a little bit of fuzziness around that. And basically the way that's going to work is that the 4 teams that lose in that first round are going to play in like an elimination bracket off stream just to see who are truly the top 6.
So, yeah, there's a lot of intrigue here to begin with. I will say that going in, when I look at this bracket and I look at recent adjustments, I do think that credit where credit is due to Immortals, where their recent, I mean, they've made some changes in management, and Immortals, they've looked really good. Not just like somewhat good, but I mean, they've looked amazing, where they went from a team that could barely dive in because just the coordination wasn't there. You replace Nomi, you replace Athan, you bring in Fate and Kriv, and suddenly they're world beaters. They are the team that has really looked to be a juggernaut here. And I got to say, even though FaZe had a good qualifying week, I don't think their group stages were as impressive. And it's another case where for FaZe, they come out with a new roster. It really catches people off guard. Now people know how this new combination of players plays. Immortals seemingly bolstered by a new coaching staff. I think it's going to be rough going for FaZe in round one.
Yeah, I mean, outside of just that tie that they ended with Immortals, I think hands down they were the best team like during groups. So I agree with you there. I think Immortals has an advantage there. LG Evil Kangarna, man, that's an interesting one too. I think,
well, especially because LG Evil had arguably the easiest group, so they've been living in a bubble. So it's hard to tell just based off the group stage how strong they are. And they're another one of those teams that sometimes they've really wrapped their head around exactly what works really well, and they all play well. And then sometimes they just, I mean, I feel like they always have a pretty good grasp around what works, but then they just can't execute on it. So it's hard to say.
I wanted to mention it on desk, but the opportunity kind of passed me by. Is that, Gil, did you not get Carbon Series flashbacks where you're looking at that and just see, oh, LG Evil, really good record here in the group stages, looking phenomenal. And then, of course, you got to the playoffs at Overwatch Carbon Series, and they weren't able to bring it all home. But, I mean, LG Evil, I think the key for them is that they finally adapted to the dive year meta. There was a time where it took them a while to really get a full adaptation to it, but finally you have Rob for 20 and Super working much better together. Jake at a time I think was a little bit on a downward slump, but now he's brought things back up. So LG Evil seems to be peaking at the right time. And for me, I still see Kangarna as a wild card. They were able to beat C9, but I don't know. I wouldn't really be surprised at anything from Kangarna from losses to wins.
Yeah, I think the rest is good actually for LG Evil. So expecting LG Evil to get through that one. Renegades, FNRGFE. So this one's intriguing. Renegades, again, you know, they've been having some good moments recently, and they're an up and down team. If they're at a high right now, this could bode well for them. But again, FNRGFE. Gosh, I don't have to say it as many times. I don't have to say it as many times as you guys. But you know, they're off of a little bit of or at least a great match against Immortals. You know, tying Immortals. So yeah, what do you guys think here?
Honestly, I wish I had seen Cloud9 versus Renegades, because that was one of the most important matches in that group. That was the reason that Cloud9 didn't move on from that group, was the fact that Renegades was able to beat them 3-1. Renegades is a team that has been in a lull for many months. Like, this team has not had any very good performances. The best performance they've had in months was third place at Carbon Series, I believe. Or was it Carbon Series? I can't quite remember.
No, Carbon Series was, I think it was Carbon Series, actually, they were somewhat disappointing.
Yeah, well, they took home third, it looks like, according to Liquipedia.
Okay.
So, yeah, this team has been in a lull. Like, that's literally the best tournament result they even have in 2017. And here they come, really, really strong. I just wish I had seen that match to kind of get a gauge on it. I think it's still a big wild card, just because simply we haven't seen this team play enough, unfortunately.
Well, I think with Renegades, they were really hurt for a long time by just their tanks not being on the same page with the rest of their team. When they were playing with Juvenile, but whether it be on Juvenile or the team, whatever was going on in the mix, is that the reality is that Juvenile would die rather early. Their tank switch up and bring in Primo has definitely worked out really well for them. Mm-hmm. I do wonder, though, like how they're going to deal with FNRGFE, because I kind of feel like matchup-wise, FNRGFE does certain things that are really going to mess with Renegades. And the biggest thing is just having a really good Diva player, and the way that FNRGFE has been controlling space, especially against a team like Renegades that does like running, say, their Fair Mercy a little bit more aggressively. That's been sort of their Achilles heel in the past, and I actually feel like this is a very tough first-round draw for Renegades, where they're an excellent team and they have good matchups against a lot of the other teams in the bracket, but I sort of think FNRGFE could be their kryptonite coming into this.
Yeah, I just want to see Renegades, what they're picking even hero-wise, because you never really know. And to have a good game plan coming in for that seems to be something that if they have to make swaps on the fly, that they will switch off to some interesting things that oftentimes don't work out. And then if they only bring one game plan, if they really are going to be relying, for instance, it's very easy to predict that from the side of FNRGFE. So you have to have something else in your belt that you know is going to work.
Yeah. If you guys didn't catch that highlight reel of Jesus on Widow, you guys need to check that out. That was pretty sick.
nuts.
Yeah, on Anubis.
I think that the interesting thing there is that the most impressive part were like the first two shots, but then you just get like the piling on stuff where it's just like, well, why not?
Well, he had a few that were like coming out of the spawn. I mean, he had a few that were pretty sweet at the end.
But the fight was kind of won at that point anyway.
Yeah, it was.
So like from that, it's just like you get to the point of, well, this is just showboating.
But you have to complete that highlight, dude. You got you got to make sure you get all the kills in that highlight reel. So you got to get them in as fast as possible. Okay, Team Liquid and Vision. So I didn't get a chance to see TL this weekend. So how did they end up playing? I mean, Vision was solid, obviously, but is Team Liquid on the rise here, or they look only okay this weekend?
Shatter with 15 ping.
No, they've been bringing their tools to bear in some very cool ways, and I feel like they're definitely on the uptick. We are going to see even more from them potentially with the Internet Hulk coming in. I think that probably had a positive effect. I guess we'll have to find out, but they are looking more consistent than they've ever been, because they've always been able to play with the top teams and pick a map or two off of them, and then it would consistently lose the rest.
And the roster changeup has worked out well for them as well. I mean, ID was a player where, he has ups and downs, but I think sometimes the downs did hurt Team Liquid. Wish all the best to him, but I think the change has been positive for Team Liquid. They clearly made some very positive moves right before the group stages began, and they brought themselves from a team that was on the brink, almost didn't make it in, the very last team to qualify, to a team that, I'm not going to say dark horse for Team Liquid because I'm too classy, because their logo is a horse, but
a dark bear.
Here, I think Team Liquid has decent chances of bringing to the finals. I think them versus either Renegades or FNRGFE would be really close if they get by Envision. I do think they're going to get by Envision just because, though Envision has looked good, I don't know, just based on the strength of what we've seen from both teams, margin of victory and all the rest, just can't really see Envision coming in. But just, due deference to Hex here, let's never forget that Team Liquid has a nearly infinite ability to break our hearts. So.
Yeah. Well, whoever gets out of this bracket, I would say, makes it to the finals has a huge opportunity. Any of these teams getting to the finals of an event is a great result already for them. And then if they end up pulling an upset of whoever's on the other side, it could be a great storyline.
I would say this is that the best storyline for me is still the FNRGFE storyline, because if they do get to the finals where you have a case where, you're the number 2 team in Contenders and you don't have a sponsor, their phone is going to be ringing off the hook with some great offers. So, you want to talk about paydays in motion. This is a case where FNRGFE can almost write their own paycheck if they are just able to really win 2 series.
Yeah, barring that roster completely falling apart, they are going to get signed. I would give it under 2 weeks, especially if they can beat Renegades in the first round. If they could beat Renegades in the first round, I would give it maybe even before. This could happen
before the end of the tournament.
Yeah, this could happen this week. Honestly, as long as the roster is doesn't just self implode, they're going to get signed.
I would hope it wouldn't happen that quickly, just because look at your contracts, people. Players, get the aid of an agent, something to take a look at. Make sure you're doing this stuff right, because I'm sorry, if you sign a contract that quickly, you are almost certainly not doing your due diligence and going through that contract and making sure that you're getting everything you want as a player more. I'll tell you, one thing I'd want as a team right now, for FNRGFE's case, with Overwatch League looming in the shadows and all the rest, is that as a team, I would want something in there. Go, look, if you're going to sell me off to another team that because they might get a really good offer from a team that does, again, the Overwatch League, right? I would hope that they put in their contracts and go, for any buyout that you have in here, we get half of it or something along those lines, because I can think of no more depressing situation for a team where they sign quickly into something where they get a lot of money. And then you have a situation where they end up finding out that some Overwatch League team has paid for their rights for, $500,000 or something. I'd be like, that would be a little bit of a buzzkill. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope that any team signings that go on, I hope the players protect themselves and they play a little bit of hardball with their contracts so they get what they're worth.
Right. Okay, well, why don't we actually move on to well, there's a little bit more with Contenders, which was just more so of just the community discussions. We're not going to go into too much in reviewing just how the tournament is, because we kind of want to wait until the whole thing's over before we make an assessment. But let's just
Don't
talk
do
about...
it.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and don't do it, just because I'm here. I actually probably have some.
No. It's more
thoughts.
like, I think Ben made a good point, just at least before the show. But let's talk about at least a little bit of the discussions or the rhetoric that's been happening in the community and Reddit and everything. So
I do have an announcement on that, by the way.
So let's talk about this
to kick
midnight
things
starting
off.
time for
That's
NA
the announcement that I
playoffs.
have.
Okay.
I have an amazing
All right.
announcement
on the
concerning
show, exclusive.
that. Yes, I actually don't even think this is on the website yet. But we have moved the start time for NA. So we're going to be starting at noon
Noon.
PDT.
Noon.
PDT.
Okay.
That's a big shift.
No, that's a couple hours. So just to be clear, Reddit was saying that something starts at midnight. That would be the projected time for the finals. So the
Right.
4th out of 4 matches would have started then. So this is several hours shifted earlier, so that hopefully the finals will start closer to like 9
Thank goodness.
or 10.
Gosh,
And just to be clear, too, is that those grand finals would have been at 9 p.m. Pacific time, which is reasonable for the West Coast, but it's just esports, I guess probably the just traditional programming in the States in general has just bowed to the whims of Eastern time for the longest period of time. So this is a case where the one time where you have it set more to the West Coast, everyone loses their minds. I mean, I understand it's late and whatnot, but you have the other side where sometimes the West Coast is like, well, I'm not even off work yet. Or,
Yeah.
Right.
So
Great.
that's one major
Noon's
thing,
great.
and
Yeah.
that's something that you can control, and that's we're looking at that. It's like, yeah, and the main reason we didn't do it earlier as well is, I mean, there's a lot of people, as it turns out, that have to be here at certain times to make this work, and we just, we had to make sure that our makeup person could show up and make us look beautiful, because it's very important.
And just for reference on the
God forbid, man,
production,
we definitely need her making people look beautiful here.
and just for reference on the production side of it, in terms of like how long the days can be on the NA day here. So we left the hotel, the casters. We left at about 1:30 in the afternoon. So of course we had to be ready and stuff by 1, get to lobby, etc. And we ended up leaving the studio at 2 a.m. So it was a 12-hour day for the casters alone on the North American day. But you think about the production people, they have to get here way earlier. I think it was closer to like a 14 to 15 hour
Yeah, it was
day.
I think that day was 16 to 17 hours for the people that came. And so like,
right. You start running out of hours in the day to some extent.
Yeah, like I wish we could do more as well, but like with World Cup coming up and constricted timelines, and I think people overestimate. I think people fit. Well, we can talk more about this later, but there is. It's not nearly as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of production, and when you're trying to fit it all into 1 or 2 days, it's definitely tough. And that's kind of when it brings us to the question of looking at how at least the group stages went, and there were a lot of things to talk about with like 4 game series and what that meant for the schedule. 16 teams, we obviously couldn't show them all. Should we have more days next time around? Should there be like 4 days of matches maybe?
And here's something to food for thought. So this is season 0. There's a few like things that people are perceiving incorrectly about this, but the next time questions are a little bit moot, because this is really going to be the only event that's run like this.
Yeah, true.
This event was focused on the players, like providing an opportunity for the players first and foremost, and then after that, how can we make sure we push as much of this to the community as possible? But season 1 is truly the start, so that's where we really start getting rolling. And I mean, I think from here on out, the goal is to stream every match and to schedule it as such. But coming into this one with World Cup, we were like, okay, we only have 5 weeks to do this. We have this many teams. We want to make sure it's competitively relevant, so that there's multiple double elimination group stage. That's a requirement, because we don't want any one-day flukes as much as we can manage. And we wanted to make sure we could have 2 open qualifiers as well, to make sure that if a team got through or got knocked out early in an open qualifier, that all the good teams had all the options to get in. And so the focus was really on the players, and starting to get into season 1, the focus is still going to be on the players, but we're able to manage that a lot easier with the number of teams and the amount of time that we have for that.
I think one really good note there too is that there's always trade-offs in production, right? And I think in this case, the trade-offs were definitely made more in favor of giving the players the best opportunity to prove themselves and get stuff in, because obviously you could do something where maybe you have less teams. And I know I'm not involved in any of these decisions regardless, but just give an idea. So the perspective is that you could make it a much more viewer-centered setup, but then under the time schedule, you would also have a situation where for the players, now you perhaps have less opportunities because there's less teams and all the rest.
No, and I think about comparing it to the Carbon series, because that was one of our first events and one of my first events. Actually, I think really my first major Overwatch event. And when we were coming into that, we were thinking we want to make sure we can do as much as we can, and we were only able to select a very few amount of teams. And that's how we made it work. So the fact that we're trying to do this with 32 teams over 2 regions is like a huge difference. And so I just keeping that in mind, I guess.
And just to know in Carbon Series is that for Carbon Series we had every game on stream, but the other thing too is that there were only 6 teams. There were a lot of teams that were very upset that they weren't involved, saying this was a great opportunity. This is one of the only tournaments in the area. We didn't get to participate in Carbon Series, and there was a lot of very upset players that they didn't get an opportunity to play in that. But that was the case where it was a more independent project for Carbon, and it was very much focused on just showing every game there. But the downside is that there's only 6 teams.
Yeah, I mean it's clear that this season is about just trying to learn from or making some mistakes, obviously doing some things right, seeing and learning from each of those things. But one thing I would have to say is that not showing like big matchups, like big name matchups, I think is one thing that probably needs to be figured out. Like Ben, I know like we didn't see like Lazer Kittens versus Misfits. We talked about it's like, oh, it sucked that we missed that one. And some of the others.
Here's the thing about that is how many big matchups are there? Because I guarantee you there's more than 4. So I mean we had to miss some, right? And another thing is we wanted to make sure we were.
Well, I mean, what ended up being shown instead of that was definitely not up to that rivalry for sure, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know from a production standpoint if it's just not possible with a given setup. I'm just saying that in the future, if it is possible to be flexible enough to just show whichever matches.
And that's the thing is, in the future, this is a moot point because all of the matches are going to be shown.
Yeah, sure.
Is the plan anyway, right?
And don't forget too, there is a trade-off there as well, where it's just like if you were to show that match, when the trade-offs probably would have had to been like not showing anything from Group B and going actually the Group B storylines here with Toronto Esports and LG Evil, actually and Envision and all the rest. It's actually you guys don't get any games because people want to see this kind of stuff more, which I mean was probably the more popular decision, but it's also given that Contenders, the goal is to try and promote all players equally and give them a chance to shine. That also would have been rough in some respects.
Yeah,
I think the biggest argument I have against, well, not against, that's the wrong way of framing it, but the biggest issue I had here, and I think in Harsha's article, same for him, was the lack of coverage for all these matches. And you guys say the schedule, we had to fit it in 4 weeks, World Cup's coming, but could you not have had a Thursday and a Friday broadcast to spread things apart? Was that completely off the table? Like, why was that off the table? I mean, this is Blizzard we're talking about. They have infinite money to put into this, and if only throwing money at things made it work 100%. And I think I just want to address, because like there's a lot of low level stuff that I mean, even if I did know, I probably couldn't talk about. But I do want to just reference Harsh's article here, because I think that there's something that's at the root of every single argument I've heard against and a lot. I appreciate a lot of the feedback, and I actually appreciate Harsha a lot. I think that he is very level-headed and he thinks everything out when he provides this kind of feedback. But from this article specifically, I think I found the root of the problem is in people's expectation. Is the first line of his article is, "For what was to be the savior for all." And I feel like, with Blizzard, they make big announcements like Overwatch League and how it's going to be so great. And then we go into Contenders, and people had this expectation that this is going to save us. This is going to bring Overwatch esports to the golden age. And it's like, that was never the purpose of Contenders. And
that I think is the root of the problem, is that we have all these high expectations, and I think that it's good to have high expectations moving forward, but realizing what this truly is and what this was meant to be, it's unfair to say that this is, this could, we can't expect all of our problems to go away magically by throwing money at it, and I think that that's really at the root of the problem here. And that said, this is also just a starting point. This is where we're going to be going into season 1, and I would say be more harsh maybe on season 1, because season 1 is truly where things are going to get going.
Again, the issue I take with that is this was barely a step in like a new direction at all, though. You guys did cool stuff with production. The commentary was phenomenal.
Yeah, all production.
I really appreciate the fact that you guys are experimenting with all this free cam, and everything about the production was a step above what we've seen before. I completely agree with that. But in terms of the schedule, in terms of the format, in terms of the amount of games that were streamed, in terms of frankly the prize pool and all the fact that there's no land, Overwatch Contenders wasn't really an improvement on what we've seen. I'll put all the production value aside. That's my perspective, and I think that's where a lot of people are coming from, Harsha included, that, okay, he's being a little sensational in that article. You're totally right.
Yeah.
But this wasn't really even a big step up. It was like maybe a small step up at most, right?
Yeah.
I mean, do you disagree with that?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and answer.
I was going to say, I would agree on a lot of levels, but like I said, this was focused on the players. And when we're talking about a logistics standpoint, I don't want to get too far into it, but if we're using like the numbers of like the casters had a 12-hour day, the production people had a 16-hour day. If you expand that beyond 2 days, you're looking at already 40+ hours, not to mention the fact that like myself, I just work every day, all day. Like I was in here earlier for meetings, and I'll be working all day today. And it literally is like physically impossible for our team anyway to do that. And if you look at the time frame that it took for us to put this together, unless I just can't think, unless they literally hired like, I can't think of a single way that they could have maintained this level of production consistency.
Just one thing that mentioned
and had all these matches streamed.
One thing to bring up here, also for Gil, is that people who don't know is that yes, he's on the host for all these matches, but he also is, of course, affiliated with Carbon and part of the management. So his day begins a lot earlier than everyone else's, where, the caster might have had a 12-hour day, but Gil also has to be here way earlier to help coordinate and produce. And then he still has to look pretty for camera and be somewhat presentable as well. So, I mean, Gil has definitely had some long days.
No, I guess I should say I understand, and like I wish it could be different as well. But I also know that it couldn't have been different realistically, without sacrificing a lot of quality, which is something that, well, first of all, Blizzard doesn't want to do. I don't want to do. And also, like I said, the focus was on the players anyway. And so, we're going to make it better in the future. But I wish I could explain it in more detail, but there's no way it could have been different.
There's always a lot behind the scenes, guys.
There's
I totally understand that.
And we definitely appreciate that. I mean, especially, Gil, we've known you've been one of the organizers too, as well as, the cast as well. But, I mean, the one thing for me, at least another way of putting it, is just that, a lot of these things are not rocket science. Like, we've done these things at other events, like planning for it. And if it's a short timeline, then that's a problem right there. There shouldn't have been a short timeline for something as big as this. So it just leads to planning in the schedule. Not necessarily you guys, because you guys are given this amount of money, do this in 5 weeks, like make it happen for us. Making the best of it, I totally understand that. But in terms of Blizzard, it just needs to be thought out better. If you're going to hype something up like Contenders, even season 0 needs to be executed at a high level. Yeah. So
and that I can understand that perspective for sure. Using that, I guess we wouldn't have had Contenders. Would have been the alternative.
Right.
And the most I'll say here too is that, I mean, the one thing that is a positive sign is, I mean, Overwatch has incredibly passionate fans already, and it's already gotten to the point where the expectations are such that, people have already developed strong attachments to these players and teams. So I definitely understand where people watching, they want as much as possible, and it's just a matter of ramping up to, provide that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've talked about contenders enough for
So
this
I could talk
episode.
about it forever.
Yes, I know. Well, we might have to have you back next week to talk about more. So let's move on to Apex Season 3, which is, wrapping up, getting into the semifinals here, and we've actually got a Western team to continue talking about because Envious is continuing on.
You.
Not beating X6, so getting revenge on X6, but not only getting revenge, just dominating X6. So, yeah, I mean, what changed there? I mean, just the way they performed on even some of the same maps, like Hanamura. I mean, it's just like back to the old Envious, just literally rinse and repeat with Sombra and the EMPs and just destroying the team and holding and things like that. Yeah, what did we see that was different here? Like, Ben?
I did watch the matches, but I'm trying to remember exactly what transpired. It was like almost a week ago at this point. In terms of the games themselves, I mean, Effect just continues to prove his utter and complete dominance. This guy, and I've said this now for like 7 weeks in a row, you can't have a good team without a god tracer. You can't have a top tier team without like a top tier tracer. It isn't working like that in the current meta. She's too strong. She's too versatile, and Envious has that player now. I mean, they had Harry Hook, they had Taimu who could flex into that role. They've had people throughout their existence that could play that role at a high level, but not at the highest level. And I think this is really just catapulting them forward. And I think they had effect for that first game against X6, but it was one of their, it was early on after Effect joined the team, relatively.
They played quite a bit with him.
It's been a month since then, so they have had more time to settle together, right? So
I will take umbrage with one thing you mentioned there, and it's a slight tangent, but even though Tracer is really good, she's also a hero that has been relatively untouched. I think we have to be careful about going, well, this hero is too strong, needs to get nerfed. And I'm just going to reference Papa Jeff's post in regards to just mentioning Reinhardt, where Reinhardt really hasn't been changed that much. Everyone goes, Reinhardt, he's too good. And then people go, actually, the strategy play is working out really well. Tracer works out really well with how people are playing right now, and in general is one of the heroes in the game that has a very high skill cap, a lot of room to maneuver with. But, I mean, there are potential ways that the meta could evolve and go a bit away from it right now. I mean, it's one of those things where if you're to change anything, maybe nerf pulse bomb charge rate a little bit, but I think you have to be careful in asking for nerfs on stuff, especially when it's coming off the part where someone has just become really, really good at a character, where it's less that the character got buffed in some way or over buffed, but just that people have gotten very good at the character.
I think talking about Effect is absolutely something we've been talking about for the last 4 weeks now, and that has been a huge difference for Envious. But I think it's remiss of us not to talk about everybody else. I mean, Chips is playing phenomenally right now. I mean, I think Coco's playing great, Mickey's playing great. Harry at times will have his moments where he's does something just barely off, like missing a drop in the beat, like by a half second or something like that. But we talk so much about Taimu in Effect that those guys I don't think get enough credit, and right now they're playing at a crazy high level too. So that's why they're able to. I mean, that's why they just crushed X6. I mean, I think the first time they played, I think that Effect leading into that was just absolutely amazing. So they just had an off day. I think that's what it ended up leading to against X6.
Well, you see that more and more in Overwatch in general, where, again, I mean, you need look only at the Misfits Lazer Kittens saga, where they are simply trading off days where they're good against each other. That, yeah, for Overwatch in general right now, you do have volatility, and sometimes it can be as simple as one player having a good day or a bad day. Oftentimes there's a little bit more factors that go into it, but, I mean, you see it in traditional sports all the time, where even a player like LeBron James will occasionally go out onto the NBA court and lay a gigantic turd. Doesn't do well.
Yeah.
It can happen to the best of people in most traditional sporting venues, so I don't think people should be too surprised that a team comes out and maybe they don't have the greatest day, because that's sports.
Yeah, we're seeing Taimu playing Sombra too, which is pretty cool. But anyways, they advanced to the semifinals. They're going to be playing KDP next, so that's, man, I feel like the winner of that one is going to win the whole thing. Maybe Lindsay Kai has something else to say, or maybe AFB, but I feel like this next semifinals, at least with them, will be the winner. But what do you guys think of this matchup? You think Envious can pull one over at KDP here?
My bias is gonna just shine straight through. I certainly hope so. I can't wait. Like Lunatic High Envious Grand Finals.
Oh, that's what
We'll bring
waiting
all the
for.
hype. I
Yes.
can't wait for that.
Oh my
I
God.
need that in my life. So
Yes.
I'm gonna be rooting that way.
It would be nice to have more of a classic finals. I don't know. It's going to be difficult. I mean, again, I've almost lost faith in my ability to predict stuff in Overwatch with all the back and forth that we have. I mean, I have to deep dive a little bit more in the Envy's recent games. I'd say that anytime you have a Tracer that is playing as well as Effect is, that it can be hard to predict just how a matchup will go down. Still a possibility, I think, though, that KDP ends up getting through. It seems pretty close, honestly.
It's like a
And
crazy.
I'll just note
superstar
that
line.
that Effect said in an interview that his communication was not where it needed to be earlier on, and he's actually getting better at English over time.
Awesome.
And also, SV Pass in chat is saying Kai tweeted that he would declassify why there was such a big difference between those two matchups between those two teams after Apex. So we'll hopefully get a little bit more information on that. But
Yeah, Kai.
I think only up for this team.
Yeah, totally.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it really depends on. I think it'll be interesting to see which Lunatic High shows up too, because we clearly saw the good Lunatic High, when in terms of knocking out LW Blue, but we'll see if they can continue on and get hot like they did last season, where they just showed dominance. Eska obviously stepped up his play like towards the end of last season, and we can see if they can do it again.
Look, man, sometimes you think that you want every matchup to be a left guy match, but sometimes right guy rears his ugly head. It happened. Okay.
That's true.
That
That's
evil son of a.
Yeah. So definitely check those out. The VODs are always on twitch.tv/OGN Global. Also, the Contenders ones are also on twitch.tv/Overwatch Contenders. We didn't get a chance to plug that. Check them all out. They're always there for you guys. But right now I want to give a shout out, or not really shout out, but just remind you guys that you can listen to the Overview on audio podcasts channels like iTunes and Google Play and SoundCloud too. So definitely check that out. And if you do enjoy the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, because it really helps out in terms of SEO on iTunes. People trying to find Overwatch, or they type in Overwatch in the search, they can find Overview, at least ranked higher. So helps us out, and it only takes a minute or two. All right, so why don't we go into a couple questions? We got time for a couple here that have been emailed to us. If you guys are interested in emailing your questions, go ahead and do that, the overview at ChanManV.tv. So we've got Offline, that's his actual name. I was listening to your last episode, and I couldn't help but notice that you haven't mentioned Sombra as a strong counter to D.Va. Since last episode, we talked obviously a lot about D.Va and just the Matrix and everything. Her hack and, of course, her EMP can easily take care of D.Va's Matrix and or boosters. I think you were too focused on damaging D.Va and forgot you could just disable her. It's always shocking to me as a Sombra main that she is always out of the equation. However, I think that now they nerfed Hog, they should just get defensive Matrix to its own state, where it was canceling the hit scan projectile meter or two out of the gun muzzle. Anyways, thanks for the podcast and keep up the good work. Okay, so let's just talk about Sombra as a D.Va counter. How effective is she?
I would just say, as someone that doesn't play a lot of Sombra, I could be totally off the mark here, but my interpretation of how to play Sombra well is you have to be playing her on points where there are easily accessible health packs. Otherwise, she's really not being used to her full potential. That means you can only use her in limited situations. D.Va, however, can be used in all situations. I mean, that's my super simple take. CP, what do you think?
I think that it's actually pretty difficult to get hacks off on D.Va in general, right? Because first of all is that, I mean, it's not impossible, but remember, Sombra's hack gets canceled if she takes any damage in the attempt. And one thing D.Va's really good at is laying down damage in a general area to make sure that you're going to hit shots. So, I mean, yeah, if you could get a hack off on D.Va and have it coordinated, it could work out. But I think that the idea that you're just going to walk in, hack the D.Va, and have everything go your way isn't exactly reflective of reality of Overwatch, where getting a hack off like that without an EMP is a lot more difficult than people probably give it credit for.
Yeah, and with an EMP, you're going to win that fight maybe, but I think it kind of comes back to something you were just talking about, Fishstix, is where are you playing her? Because it's more of when I think of counters, I mean, the first thing is, is it valuable enough for me to pick it, at any given moment? Am I going to be like playing, if I see them playing D.Va, am I like, oh, I need to get on Sombra? That's probably not going to be the first thing that goes through my head. It's probably going to be, okay, I'm on second Anubis. and my team knows how to use this strategy. Let's go ahead and pull it out because there's packs in the right locations and we're going to play it well. And so it would be a happy accident, the fact that now D.Va is nullified from that. It might be more of a reason to switch off of D.Va if you know a point is going to have that, but even that, it's really not.
I mean, there's no character that's going to be better against EMP than, like specifically better against EMP than D.Va. So, I mean, why would you switch to something else, right?
The other thing too about it is that what is your engagement point there? Where the question there is just ask is that why don't you just hack the D.Va and kill her? It's like, well, I mean, generally speaking, D.Va comps tend to be more aggressive. They get into your face. Are you sitting there waiting for the Sombra to hack the D.Va and then go and focus D.Va after? I mean, Overwatch engagements are a little bit messier than that to begin with, and single target hacks, I mean, they're more crimes of opportunity rather than something that you can always reliably get done. It's a case where I'm coming in for a flank on the support doing this, and maybe I can hack the D.Va here, versus I'm going to go in and I'm just going to hack the D.Va and everything about engagement is going to go super great.
Yeah, Sombra's hack, her right click is like actually probably her least useful ability out of everything else, to be honest.
Yeah, icing. But we are seeing her a lot more, and we're seeing teams be able to streamline her EMP charges. I mean, there was definitely multiple times where it was literally she was able to charge up EMP, at least in that Envious match, every time they came through. Time almost had an EMP every time they fought. And the one time he didn't have it, they ended up taking the point. So
and obviously this is going to look different in your competitive queue experience.
Of course.
So, Sombra might be a little bit more viable if you're really ridiculously good and can tell your team, please just go to that health pack. But pro play, that's kind of
you barely even get like your mercies are able to people going over a health pack instead of you letting your mercies charge up. So it's going to be even harder with Sombras. Okay, we got another question here from Devin. So just to show we have some love for console folks, guys. Love the show. I am a GM console player, and I was wondering what the group's thought, is on balancing console and PC separately. For example, Pharah and Tracer are really good on console because we don't have the aim like people would on PC. So we can't just switch to Widow McCree for a good counter until you get into the top 500, where there are really good McCrees, I guess. So, I guess general concept, balancing, just having the game be a little bit different on the two different platforms. What do you guys think? Ben?
It has to be.
Yeah, sure. I have no qualms with that. I mean, they already did it with Torbjorn, right? They did it with Torb and Sim.
Yeah.
And I have absolutely no qualms with that whatsoever. I think it's a different platform, different mechanics. Yeah, do it.
There's just realities of playing with a controller that limit your ability to do certain things with heroes that you can do with a mouse and keyboard. It's a case where there's a lot to be said for people that enjoy playing with a controller. It's a different type of skill to be sure. But if you're going on just raw ability to do crazy things, especially with hit scan heroes, a controller is never going to give you the same level of accuracy, which means that the output of a McCree or a Widowmaker or a Soldier on console is never going to quite match what you're going to be doing on a PC for a whole host of reasons. So that means that if you wanted, you either have to bring Overwatch console in sort of its own balance path entirely, or you have to sort of look at it and go, well, on PC, McCree is doing this much damage because of this, but on console, maybe it needs to be doing more to compensate for the fact that it's harder to hit shots. I mean, I don't know. The balance thing there is definitely a difficult equation, but I think for me, I definitely agree that console probably has to be treated somewhat differently.
Yeah, especially if they're having these leagues, right? They're full-out leagues for the Xbox as well as PlayStation. So from a competitive standpoint, they absolutely need to balance it for console differently. Okay, well,
Core in chat says most of the top 500 use mouse and keyboard on.
That's true. You can totally plug in mouse and keyboard.
That's such an interesting stuff because you can make the argument that would you be allowed to use that at a console tournament? The answer many times is no, because they're talking about the idea of mouse and keyboard interpreters, basically, where they try and give you the best mouse and keyboard output that a controller can put out, but you're still not getting the response.
Oh, is that how it works? Yeah. I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Acceleration of acceleration.
Unless I'm horribly misinformed here, I don't think you can just plug in a mouse and keyboard, but they have sort of intermediaries that will translate your mouse and keyboard to controller inputs, but you can't flick your mouse and have that be translated one-to-one controller. Controller's supposed to play by the rules of
because
controller
it
input.
still uses the joystick acceleration. And once again, not an expert. I did buy one of these adapters a long time ago so I could play with my roommates because I just got super pissed off as an FPS player on PC when we would like casually play FPSs on their
Feels
Xboxes.
terrible, man.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm much better than this.
Yeah, I always have to admit that I've had difficulty getting into console FPS games just because I grew up on mouse and keyboard, and for me, I love the control scheme of mouse and keyboard heavily, and but I do respect the skill that controllers take. There's absolutely skill involved in using them.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap everything. That's going to wrap up this episode. Great episode. We flew through all these things, and you know, Gil, every time you're on, man, things just flow. You know, we seem to get a lot done, so I'm gonna have to have you on more, buddy. But
actually, Chairman, it's been 4 hours. It's the presence.
It's the presence. It's the Overwatch contenders coming to the overview, basically. But I want to do some shout outs. We'll start with the left guy, Gil.
I mean, I'm just gonna shout out Brooke, the makeup girl. She makes us look really good. Working miracles. Day in. It's serious. It's like almost startling sometimes. I think how she makes us look. Some of us more than others.
Well, I mean, we know there's limits to working miracles. I mean, my face is still on camera after all. But definitely shout out to all the staff that has been working at Contenders. As we mentioned earlier in the day, is that I mean, even on the casters, we have long days, but the production guys have been putting in tons of work, and I can't really praise them enough for the work they've done in the back. So big shouts to them. And also Twitter. What is your I follow you on Twitter, but what is your Twitter?
Gillfrost.
At Gillfrost. Okay, there's no numbers.
Shocker.
There. It's not at Gillfrost.
You should just get left guy.
You should seriously get left guy.
Wait,
I've been pressured into that, but my identity is Gil, so it's so hard.
No, your identity is left guy.
My new identity is
shameless self plug. Follow at Tempo
Ben, you want to do shout outs?
Guys, know that when I'm giving harsh criticism on Contenders, it's coming from a place of love. I think you guys are doing an awesome job. Been enjoying all of the games thoroughly. Of course, there's room to grow, and that's why we're going to be critical on this show. That's the whole point of it.
Passionate about it. That's
looking forward to next weekend because Contenders Finals is going to wrap up. Super excited to see what the hell happens. Wait, can you actually? So the top 8s are both going to take place this weekend. Is that correct?
Yeah, it all ends this weekend.
Yeah.
So top 8 for NA is going to all happen. Then they're going to do the lower relegations to figure out who moves on, and then those top 6 are going to do a bracket right. I'm thinking about this wrong.
I'll make this simple. 6 teams from after Sunday. We will have our 6 teams that will feed into Contender Season 1, and they will be joined by Rogue and Envy, who were auto-seeded in the Season 1 because they're playing in Apex, or at least we thought Rogue would still be playing in Apex. So they got the benefit of the doubt.
We're going to get to see Rogue and Envy just completely smash everyone. It's going to be I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter, Fishstix.
All right. Thanks to all 3 of you guys for doing the show. And same here. You know, I think we're super excited about just Overwatch right now and just everything that's going on. Can't wait to see the finals of all of these things culminating in the next week or so. So if you're a fan of Overwatch, this is a great time to catch as much as you can. You can catch all the VODs on Twitch.tv and just all the different channels that I mentioned before. You can follow this show at the Overview GG on Twitter, myself at ChanManV, and you can find the VODs at youtube.com/ChanManV a little bit later. Find all the old episodes there too. And just another reminder, you can listen to us on the way to work, while you're working out on your iPhone or your iPad or whatever on iTunes. And the way you find us, type the Overview or Overwatch and you'll find us, and subscribe to that. But that's going to be it, guys, for the Overview episode 65. So for Gillfrost, ZP, Fishstix, and myself, ChanManV, we'll see you next time. Later.
Hot mic.